A forgotten secret has been hidden for 100 years. Looming in the dark blue depths is the grave of the gigantic ship Britannic.
It's the most awe-inspiring sight I've ever seen.
A hush fell across the control room the moment the drone's floodlights pierced the darkness surrounding the HMHS Britannic. The operators had guided submersibles into her shadowed corridors before, but never with equipment this advanced, never with mapping systems capable of threading a machine through the narrowest gangway or the most unstable passage. The feed flickered as the drone advanced, its cameras stabilizing, its lights revealing the ghostly outline of a once grand hospital ship now resting silently on the ocean floor. What appeared on the monitors looked less like a sunken vessel and more like a colossal cathedral drowned under a world of perpetual night. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Even after more than a century underwater, the Britannic retained a presence that felt almost supernatural. She came into view not as a crumbling relic, but as a wounded giant, resting on her side as if caught between attempting to rise again and surrendering completely to the depths. The drone drifted along her hull, revealing scars where steel had twisted into strange shapes. Every ridge and fracture looked deliberate, as though the ship had evolved after death into something unrecognizable, shaped not by time alone, but by the crushing pressure of the sea. The decision to send a drone deeper into the Britannic than ever before had come from a desire to preserve what remained without risking divers' lives. Human explorers could never reach some of the ship's most dangerous regions. These places were squeezed between collapsed decks, stuffed with tangled beams, or filled with decades of silt lying in precarious piles ready to shift at the slightest disturbance. For years, these sealed spaces had remained untouched, as if the ship still guarded secrets not meant for the living. This time, the team intended to push further, into rooms no diver had glimpsed, into corridors blocked since the day the ship sank. As the drone approached a jagged breach in the hull, its cameras captured a tangle of seagrass and rusticles that hung like vines from the metal edges. The hole seemed too narrow, but the drone adjusted its stabilizers and glided through. Light spilled across a corridor coated in sediment, so fine it swirled like pale smoke. Every beam of metal wore a skin of corrosion that feathered outward like frost. Pipes lined the walls in bending arcs, twisted from years of pressure. The effect was unsettling, as if the corridor itself were shifting under the observation. Farther inside, the drone illuminated a collection of personal items trapped in a corner where the floor had buckled downward. What looked like a shattered lamp, a bent metal frame, and fragments of porcelain lay buried under layers of rust. These objects had been frozen in place since the ship went down, yet their arrangement made it seem as though someone had dropped them only moments before fleeing the corridor. The drone lingered on this scene, and the team watched with a quiet unease, sensing the tension embedded in the artifacts. The next room the drone entered had partially collapsed, its entrance framed by beams that leaned inward like the ribs of a creature long dead. The crew held their breath as the drone maneuvered through the narrow space. Light spilled onto a wall where marine organisms shimmered in pale blues and greens. They seemed to move in slow waves, reacting to the disturbance. The swirling shapes made the wall appear alive, rising and falling like some slumbering entity. The sight stirred a visceral reaction in the observers, a primal sense of sitting too close to something that was waking. As the drone changed angle, another structure came into focus, a set of metal cabinets still bolted to the wall. Their doors hung open at odd angles, swaying gently in the currents. Inside, objects lay scattered in disarray. Tools, containers, and indistinguishable pieces of hardware appeared tangled together, wrapped in sheets of corrosion. Yet despite the decay, the formation of the objects felt too deliberate to be random. It resembled a pattern, almost like a symbol, although no one could place its meaning. The drone inspected it from different angles, sending back footage that only deepened the sense of unease rather than providing clarity. Moving deeper into the ship, the drone entered what had once been a ward. Rows of decayed bed frames lay tilted sideways due to the ship's resting angle. Some were half buried in sediment, while others remained surprisingly intact, eerily aligned as if waiting for patients who would never arrive. The silt in this room floated thickly, reacting to currents and movements like drifting fog. When the lights moved across the room, shadows twisted along the ceiling beams, creating the illusion of movement behind the drone. More than one operator reported feeling watched through the camera feed, an irrational impression yet impossible to shake. At the far end of the ward stood a collapsed partition. Behind it, the drone revealed a smaller chamber that seemed strangely untouched. Instead of scattered debris, the objects here rested in oddly neat arrangements. A metal tray lay perfectly centered on a counter. Containers were lined up with precision. Even a chair remained upright, as though someone had left it carefully in place. These elements made the space appear preserved, yet preservation at this depth was not natural. The order felt intentional, like the silent trace of someone's presence long after they should have vanished. The deeper the drone ventured, the more the ship's interior transformed from familiar ruin to something that felt almost organic. Walls appeared to curve in subtle ways not explained by the original architecture, as though the metal had warped into flowing shapes reminiscent of bone or cartilage. Growths of rust clung to surfaces in patterns that resembled tendrils. These formations were not random, they spread with an almost rhythmic logic, radiating from points of stress as though responding to the ship's history of trauma. In a chamber near the bow, the drone encountered an oblong cavity where the wall had torn open during the sinking. Inside, clusters of marine life clung to twisted metal, forming strange symmetrical shapes. What unsettled the observers was the way these organisms synchronized their movement with the drone's light. When the illumination shifted, they pulsed in unison, rippling across the chamber like a single entity reacting to an intrusion. The moment seemed to hold a kind of intelligence, or at least an uncanny mimicry of it. Continuing into the forward cargo area, the drone found a passage where the walls narrowed dramatically. This section was almost entirely inaccessible to divers. A tight beam of light revealed a tangled web of ropes, netting, and metallic shards intertwined like the remnants of a broken trap. The remnants of storage crates lay splintered beneath the debris, and something within the pile glimmered faintly. The drone approached, and the reflection sharpened into the metallic edge of a tool partly buried under netting. Its handle protruded at an angle that resembled a grasping hand. The visual effect triggered an instinctive discomfort among the viewers. Farther in, the drone entered a chamber where the ceiling had collapsed into a jagged dome. The fractured metal formed shapes resembling enormous claws or talons gripping inward. The lights cast shadows that emphasized the menacing forms. Though the shapes were natural consequences of a structural collapse, the imagery was jarring, conjuring impressions of a predatory force that had crushed the interior from above. The drone hesitated, its sensors analyzing the stability of the structure before pushing onward. The atmosphere shifted again when the drone reached a deeper compartment sealed since the day of the sinking. The doorframe was bent but still attached, wedged shut by pressure and sediment. As the drone's mechanical arms brushed away the silt, the door creaked open slightly, releasing a cloud that enveloped the feed in swirling darkness. When the view cleared, the drone's lights revealed an interior that felt disturbingly preserved. The room appeared suspended in time, its contents settled as though waiting for someone to return. Shelves lined the walls, holding objects laid out with precision. Containers sat in orderly rows, their surfaces coated in a thin sheen of corrosion. A small desk stood in the center, its edges softened by rust, but still recognizable. The layout suggested this had once been a workspace of someone with meticulous habits. The unnerving part was that everything remained positioned too perfectly, untouched by the chaos that had overtaken the rest of the ship. It was as if the room had been spared by some strange pocket of pressure or trapped in a protective cocoon of still water. As the drone surveyed the chamber, the cameras picked up faint streaks across the walls, long, thin scratches running parallel to one another. Their pattern was too regular to be natural, perhaps created by shifting metal during the sinking, yet their spacing and uniformity created a deeply unsettling impression. The scratches formed sequences that spiraled subtly, almost like marks made in distress or as a warning left behind. The source of the marks was impossible to determine. They added a sense of tension that clung to the entire room. In a far corner, the drone focused on a collapsed wooden cabinet whose contents had spilled onto the floor. What appeared to be notebooks, now fused into rusted masses, lay amid fragments of glass. Although nothing could be read or salvaged, the items suggested an attempt by someone to organize or record something before the sinking. The very idea that notes or observations might have been preserved in this sealed space added layers of mystery to what the Britannic still concealed. Beyond this room, the drone descended a steep slope created by a collapsed stairwell. The twisting metal formed a path that thrust the drone deeper into a space shaped by distortion rather than design. The texture of the walls here shifted dramatically. Corrosion formed ridges and spirals that mimicked biological structures. The effect was not just uncanny, but deeply disorienting, as though the drone had entered a different environment entirely, one shaped more by the sea than by human engineering. In this distorted region, the drone's lights revealed a series of large containers lined along a wall, likely storage vessels ruptured during the sinking. Their contents had spilled out and merged with silt and marine growth, forming shapes that twisted into unrecognizable lumps. Some looked eerily like skeletal forms, though the resemblance was purely coincidental. Still, the imagery had a powerful psychological impact on the operators. Something about the combination of organic shapes and decayed metal struck a primal chord, stirring unease that felt older than memory. As the drone pressed onward, it reached a chamber flooded with an unusual density of marine life. Fish pulsed through the water in tight formations, moving in patterns that avoided certain areas of the room. Their synchronized behavior suggested the presence of something in the environment that caused them to react instinctively. The drone's sensors detected subtle changes in water composition, pockets of colder currents, denser sediment layers, but nothing that explained the fish's rigid avoidance of specific spots. When the drone illuminated one of these avoided areas, the cause became clearer, though no less disturbing. A mass of twisted metal protruded from the wall, forming a shape almost like a colossal, gaping mouth, with jagged edges resembling teeth. This was purely the result of structural collapse and corrosion, yet the impression was so vivid that even experienced researchers felt a chill. The fish swam in unified arcs away from the formation, their movements guided by instincts humans could only guess at. At the edge of this eerie chamber, the drone located another breach leading into a narrow mechanical space. The walls here were lined with warped pipes and valves, their arrangement forming a maze-like pattern. The drone squeezed through, mapping every inch. The deeper it moved, the more cramped the surroundings became. At certain angles, the pipes clustered together so densely they resembled the branching limbs of a skeletal structure. The confined space magnified every shadow into elongated forms that moved with the currents. Eventually, the drone entered a larger void, a cavernous compartment where structural damage had carved out an unnatural hollow. The ceiling arched upward in a curve that mimicked the inside of a ribcage. The floor dropped away into a pit filled with dark silt. The drone hovered above it, sending down a tight beam of light. The silt remained still for several seconds, then shifted slightly as if stirred from below. The disturbance was faint, yet unmistakable. The team debated whether it was caused by a current or the movement of marine animals concealed beneath the debris, but the ripple pattern seemed too uniform, too methodical, almost as if responding to the presence of the drone. When the drone moved away, the silt settled. When it hovered closer again, the disturbance returned. The behavior had no clear explanation, yet the effect was undeniably unsettling, adding to the growing sense that the deeper regions of the Britannic held environmental anomalies shaped across decades of isolation. At the far end of the cavernous space lay another partial opening, large enough for the drone to enter. On the other side, the lights revealed an enclosed chamber filled with debris that looked almost staged. A ladder leaned upright against the wall despite the surrounding chaos. A heavy metal container sat centered in the room, its lid resting at an angle rather than having been blown free. A long length of canvas lay stretched across the floor in a pattern too straight to be random. The positioning of each item created an uncanny sense of design rather than accident. Something about the arrangement felt ritualistic, though no human activity could have occurred in this sealed environment since the ship went down. The drone drifted closer, examining the canvas. Beneath it lay impressions in the silt shaped like elongated marks, almost as if something had been dragged or shifted before the canvas came to rest. Continuing its exploration, the drone ventured into a narrow corridor that descended sharply. The walls here bore more of the mysterious parallel scratches seen earlier. They crossed one another in intricate patterns, forming spirals and intersecting lines. The repetitive nature of the marks suggested some mechanical origin, yet there was no equipment in the ship that could have produced them in such controlled sequences. The tension in the control room grew as the drone continued to record these baffling details. The corridor ended in a final chamber where the architecture seemed almost consumed by the sea. Metal beams curved inward like the withered limbs of a skeletal frame. The walls were coated in flowing formations of rust that resembled the textures of muscle and sinew. Everything appeared fused, as though the ship itself had transformed into an organic entity over time. In the center of the room lay a large depression filled with silt. Unlike earlier disturbances, this one appeared perfectly smooth, almost polished. There was no movement, no ripples, just an unnervingly pristine void surrounded by warped structures that gave the impression of a creature guarding its heart. When the drone approached, its sensors picked up slight fluctuations in pressure, subtle but unusual for such an enclosed space. The chamber radiated an indescribable intensity, not because of anything actively threatening, but because of the overwhelming sense of witnessing something profoundly alien, created not by intention, but by nature's relentless reimagining of human structures. The Britannic had become something beyond a shipwreck. It had evolved into an environment shaped by pressure, time, and isolation into forms that defied logical expectations. The drone hovered silently in the chamber's center for several long moments, recording every detail. The footage revealed a hauntingly beautiful yet deeply unsettling transformation, an underwater world sculpted by decades of darkness into something both mesmerizing and terrifying. Nothing supernatural existed here, yet the psychological impact of the environment suggested that nature itself had crafted a realm meant to be observed with caution, a reminder of the strange metamorphoses that occur when human creations are left alone in the deep. As the drone finally turned back toward the exit corridors, the ship seemed to shift subtly in the shadows, as though exhaling after holding its secrets close. The Britannic remained silent, but her eerie interior had revealed a truth that would linger in the minds of those who witnessed it. The ocean does not merely consume, it transforms. It reshapes everything it claims into forms that defy expectations, leaving behind spaces that seem to whisper warnings through their silence. The drone's journey through the Britannic had unveiled more than decaying steel and forgotten relics. It had exposed a realm where the boundaries between the natural and the unnatural blurred in ways that stirred primal instincts. The deeper recesses of the ship held no monsters, no supernatural forces, yet the shapes carved by pressure and time conveyed an unmistakable sense of dread. It was a reminder that the ocean's depths are not just places of darkness, they are places where human understanding fractures under the weight of environments too alien, too ancient, and too unforgiving to feel familiar. What lay inside the Britannic was not terrifying because of anything living within it. It was terrifying because of what the ocean had made of it. The ship had become a monument to the unsettling creativity of the deep, where beauty and horror intertwine in silence, and where the remnants of human history transform into something otherworldly under the crushing embrace of the sea. The drone resumed its path through the Britannic's obscured interior, gliding towards sections of the ship that had yet to be illuminated by human technology. Each new turn revealed spaces shaped by forces too immense to fully comprehend. Deeper than the previous chambers, the water grew thicker with particulate matter, drifting in slow spirals that resembled snowflakes suspended in a world where time no longer had meaning. This layer of dense, ancient sediment suggested the drone was passing into regions untouched, even by the currents that usually sweep through shipwrecks. The isolation of these compartments hinted at mysteries the sea had preserved with meticulous care. As the drone passed beneath a collapsed section of overhead decking, its lights revealed a network of beams twisted into serpentine forms. These contorted metal lengths weaved together in a manner that almost resembled interlocking spines. The more the drone examined them, the more apparent it became that the collapse had occurred in stages rather than all at once. Each beam seemed to have sustained stress at different points in time, forming a chronological tapestry of destruction recorded in bent steel. The operators watched with fascination, struck by how the ship's disintegration told a story far more complex than a single catastrophic sinking. Beyond this skeletal structure awaited a chamber partially shielded by dangling sheets of corroded metal that draped like curtains. When the drone parted these metallic veils, the space within appeared strangely serene. Light revealed delicate patterns of bioluminescence running across the walls in streaks and clusters, as though some marine organisms had adopted the room as their sanctuary. Their glow cast shifting patterns along the surfaces, revealing fine details of the ship's internal wiring, now reduced to hollow cords encrusted with mineral deposits. The quiet luminescence imbued the environment with an eerie tranquility that contrasted sharply with the violent history entombed in the metal around it. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on what the underwater drone will uncover inside HMHS Britannic? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.